In every city, there are stories that never made the papers. Not because they weren't important, but because they were inconvenient. They live in forgotten files, in half-finished investigations, in questions no one wanted answered. This isn't where justice always wins. This is where the echoes remain. This is Reverberating Noir. There are cities that remember, and there are cities that pretend to forget. New York has always been the second kind. Welcome to Reverberating Noir.
A man is found beaten to death inside his own locked home. No forced entry, nothing stolen, no one ever charged. And the city that called him one of its finest simply moved on.
July 28th, 1870. Fifth Avenue, the gilded heart of the most ambitious city on earth. And somewhere inside a brownstone that smelled of money and mahogany and summer heat, a son opened a door he could never close again.
Tonight, we're going back. Not because we have answers, but because the questions themselves are the most disturbing part.
This is the story of Benjamin Nathan, the man the Gilded Age couldn't protect, and the murder that New York City has never solved. Before we talk about how he died, you have to understand who he was, because that's what makes this case so unsettling. It wasn't a man on the margins. It wasn't someone the city could quietly set aside.
Benjamin Nathan was embedded in the architecture of New York itself, shipping, finance, philanthropy. He wasn't just accumulating wealth, he was deploying it. Institutions, community, culture. He believed in the city the way people believe in a promise.
And in 1870, New York was a city in the middle of becoming something. The Civil War had just ended. The population was surging. The skyline was changing its shape almost every year. And men like Benjamin Nathan were at the center of it all, not just watching building.
His home at 123 Fifth Avenue wasn't a monument to wealth. It was a working house, a gathering place. People moved through it. Ideas moved through it. Which means people knew it, knew the layout, knew the rhythms of who came and went.
That detail matters. Hold on to it. The morning of July 28th begins the way summer mornings in New York always do. Heavy, close. The kind of heat that sits on your chest before you've even opened your eyes.
Washington Nathan Benjamin's son was in the house that night. He was the one who found him. Multiple blows to the head, blood on the floor. His father, one of the most prominent men in the city, lying dead in his own bedroom.
And the doors, locked from the inside.
That's the detail that has anchored this case for 150 years. No signs of forced entry, nothing visibly taken. A man is dead, and the house itself seems to offer no explanation for how anyone got in or out.
In 1870, that's not a puzzle you can hand to a forensics team. There is no forensics team. There are detectives with notebooks, witnesses with motives, and a city full of people who are already reading about it in the morning papers.
The newspapers moved fast. Of course they did. A wealthy Jewish philanthropist murdered in his own Fifth Avenue home under circumstances no one could explain. This was the story of the year. Maybe the decade.
And in that kind of glare, everyone becomes a suspect, including the son standing in the doorway.
Washington Nathan came under suspicion almost immediately. And I want to be precise about why, because it's important not to confuse motive with guilt.
He had debts, significant gambling debts, the kind that don't stay quiet, and his father had been the one absorbing them.
So on paper, you have a son with financial pressure, a father who controlled the relief valve, and a locked house with no other obvious explanation. Investigators looked at him hard. But looking isn't the same as finding...
Because here's what the evidence couldn't answer. If Washington Nathan killed his father in that room, how did he lock the door from the inside and then appear on the other side of it?
And if someone else did it, someone who knew the house, knew the schedule, knew how to move through it without leaving a trace, who was that person? And how did they disappear so completely?
The police offered rewards, substantial ones by the standards of the time. They followed leads across the city. They questioned business associates, household staff, people connected to Nathan's financial dealings. Every thread they pulled unraveled into nothing.
No arrest, no trial, no resolution.
Just a locked room. and a city that eventually stopped asking.
This is the part of the case I find most revealing, not the crime itself, but the investigation. Because what you're looking at in 1870 is a system encountering its own limits in real time.
No forensic science, no understanding of blood spatter, no preservation protocols for crime scenes, no way to track a suspect across jurisdictions with any reliability. They were working with eyes and ears and instinct, and sometimes that's simply not enough.
But here's what I keep coming back to. The locked room problem isn't just a technical puzzle. It's a psychological one. It tells you something about how the killer, if there was an intruder, thought about the crime, the staging, the deliberateness of it.
You're saying someone planned this?
I'm saying someone understood that the locked room would become the story, that it would redirect attention, that it would make the crime feel impossible and therefore unsolvable.
That's a cold kind of intelligence.
Or a desperate one. Sometimes those look identical from the outside.
Think about what it meant to be Washington Nathan in the weeks after that morning. You found your father's body, you're grieving, or you're supposed to be. And every person you pass on Fifth Avenue is quietly deciding whether you're a son or a suspect.
That's not a hypothetical discomfort. That's a specific, documented social reality of the time. The newspapers had already done the work. His name was in print alongside his father's death in ways that never fully separated the two.
He was never charged. Let me say that clearly. Washington Nathan was never charged, never tried, never convicted of anything in connection with his father's death. But in a city like New York in 1870, suspicion had a way of sticking to a person like summer heat.
And that's one of the systemic failures I think gets overlooked in this case. The investigation couldn't find the killer, but in the absence of answers, it still managed to destroy something. A reputation. A family's ability to grieve without being watched.
The machinery of suspicion kept turning long after the machinery of justice had stopped.
I want to talk about the business angle for a moment, because it tends to get less attention than the family dynamics, and I think that's a mistake.
Nathan's financial connections ran deep. Shipping, banking, the kind of dealings that in 1870 could carry enormous stakes and very few legal guardrails.
Rivalries in that world weren't abstract. They were personal. They were sometimes violent. And a man with Nathan's reach would have had adversaries, people who stood to gain, or to stop losing, if he was gone.
But the investigation never produced a name from that direction either. No business partner, no rival, no creditor, nothing that held.
Which brings us back to the locked room. Because whatever the motive was, family, finance, something else entirely, the method points to someone who had access. Not just to the house, to the trust of the household.
Someone who belonged there. Or who had learned to move as if they did.
And that is the detail that makes this case feel less like history and more like a warning.
Here's what most people miss when they encounter this case. They focus on the mystery of the locked room, the puzzle of it, the almost elegant impossibility of how it was done.
And in doing that, they stop asking the harder question.
Which is?
Why did the investigation fail so completely? Not just technically because, yes, 1870 had no forensic science, but structurally, a prominent man is murdered. Rewards are offered. The city's attention is fully focused. And still nothing.
You think something was being protected?
I think that when wealth and reputation are involved in any era, investigations have a way of finding the edges of what they're willing to pursue. And then, stopping there.
The locked room kept everyone looking at the how. And nobody ever answered the who.
Or the why they were allowed to disappear?
155 years. That's how long this case has been open. Not officially. Officially, it's cold. Closed by time, if not by resolution. But open in the way that unsolved things stay open. In the way they live in the people who keep asking.
The house at 123 Fifth Avenue is gone, torn down, built over. The city moved on, the way cities do without ceremony, without acknowledgement, but the case persists. Not because we're sentimental about the Gilded Age, but because the shape of what happened here is recognizable.
A man of standing. A system that couldn't or wouldn't find the answer. A family left to carry the weight of suspicion and grief simultaneously. And a city that preferred the comfort of moving forward to the discomfort of staying with the question.
That pattern doesn't belong to 1870. It belongs to every era that has ever decided some questions are too inconvenient to fully pursue.
And that is why this case still reverberates. Benjamin Nathan believed in something. He believed that a city could be built into something worthy of the people who lived in it. He gave money, time, presents, the things that actually cost something. And on a hot July morning, in a room he should have been safe in, that belief ran out of room to breathe. The locked door has never been explained. The killer has never been named. And somewhere underneath the streets of a city that has forgotten his address, the question is still there. Quiet, patient, waiting. If this kind of story, the kind that doesn't resolve, that doesn't comfort, that stays with you after you've closed the tab, if that's what you came here for, then you're in the right place. Subscribe to Reverberating Noir. We're here every week, in the dark, where the cases that should have been solved never were.
The murder of Benjamin Nathan was investigated thoroughly by the standards of its time. Rewards were offered, leads were followed, and every single one of them went cold. Which means one of two things. Either the killer was extraordinarily careful, or someone, somewhere, decided that finding them was not worth what it would cost. We don't know which. And that is the part that should keep you up at night.
The recording ends here, but the case doesn't. Somewhere, the evidence still exists. The questions still wait. If this story stayed with you, if it followed you into the silence, subscribe to Reverberating Noir. Not for us, for the stories that refuse to disappear.
Because as long as something doesn't make sense, the truth is still out there. And someone will find it.
Until next time, keep listening to the dark.